All right, so this month I'm going to present, not because I want to present, but because I was lazy in finding someone to speak, so figured I would do it. This is a topic I think that nearly anybody who's working on a website, and probably people who aren't working on websites, are dealing with, which is how do you deal with sort of user-uploaded content that you process, stage, store, serve. So I want to get through the slides pretty quick. I'll dive into some of our code just because I feel like that's something that's we're supposed to do it here in this meetup. But I want to get pretty quick to sort of discussion and just hear how other people are doing it, get the questions. So I'll try to keep this pretty quick. Okay? Cool. And if you can't hear me, tell me and I'll shout. And also feel free to interrupt me because this isn't, I don't want this to, this isn't like I'm not a professor. Shut up. All right, so I'll do the sort of required Meetup. So we're a New York-based tech company. We were founded in 2002, actually just a few blocks south of here. Currently, we are now about 81,000 paying groups. We do about 1.2 million, actually somewhere maybe closer to 1.4 now, RSVPs per month. That works out to about 25,000 of what we consider successful meetups. That means that 4 or more people showed up a week. We've actually just closed our 6th quarter of profitability, which is kind of exciting. We're very happy about that. And actually, we're a team right now. We're about 70 people. We actually are on the 10th floor. This is my obligatory. We're hiring for everything, and we're actually working on a lot of really cool projects. It's a very laid-back, cool crowd. Very startup-y, despite the fact that we're profitable. We get a lot of cool perks. So, if you're looking for work, or if you are bored, or you currently work and want to try something else, come see me afterwards. Cool. All right, photos. So I know there's some in the room who these numbers are pretty tiny, but these are the numbers we're dealing with. We deal with about 500,000 user-uploaded photos per month, give or take. There's obviously peaks for that, but that's the raw number. For each of those, we need to process them into, depending on the type of photo, somewhere between 3 to 5 different sort of dimensions. We've been playing with auto orientation, but I've sort of bailed on that for now because of some issues and it wasn't a high priority. And obviously we want to make sure that we're stripping out exif information and any other metadata attached to the photo to make sure that it serves quickly. The storage, our goals for this were, when we first started doing this, we were running this off of a few boxes and we were storing it all on local hard drives. That didn't last long. So our goal was to figure out, once we started to figure out how do we go beyond that, we want to make sure it's cheap, it's very easy to scale, it's highly redundant, and the performance for us, the actual serving performance directly off storage didn't need to be super fast because we already had CDN in front of it and also various other local caching layers in front. So that was sort of the problems that we were looking at. As far as processing, we've been using ImageMagick. We've played with Graphics Magic. I suspect that's probably the same for most people, but I've played around with it left here. That's a fairly CPU-intensive task. It's not so much I/O or memory. We did not want to be doing processing in our core application, so we're a Java application. Number of reasons. One, large uploads that holds up the entire request, and we let people upload anywhere from, I think right now it's about 50 at one time, so that can take a long time. Also, ImageMagick, for any of you who have dealt with it, has an issue where it will segfault on certain types of photos, and we've sort of stopped trying to figure out the pattern of that. But when running inside of Java, using JMagick, it actually will take out the entire JVM, which would shut our website down. So that sort of meant that we didn't want to do it in the main process. The other goal is, as a philosophy, we try to structure most all of the entire architecture of Meetup as a sort of highly distributed, no single point of failure for most all services. So we wanted, for me, that means it should be able to work behind a dumb round-robin load balancer. Just a stupid piece of networking equipment that could balance requests across, and if one loses, you lose one, it doesn't break the whole thing. So that meant we ended up going with a sort of batch processing service. That said, we still learned to be fairly rapid. We didn't want it to, we didn't want you to upload your photo and wait for 3 hours before you see it. When we started looking at storage, again, I mentioned this, the requirements were cheap, scalable, redundant, and easy. The one thing I left off of this list, which is pretty obvious now, is cloud. That wasn't so available at the time when we were looking at this. I mean, there were some solutions, but Amazon S3 was, I think, just coming out and wasn't something that we trusted. But we could apply that sort of same set of logic to this, and maybe we will. Local RAID is pretty easy, obviously, right? Not super scalable. It's arguably not that redundant as you end up with a single box that can lose everything. It's also not that cheap, I don't think. SAN, scalable, easy, and redundant, but it's pretty damn expensive. Not something that, this was 4 or 5 years ago. We didn't have the budget to deal with throwing money at these things. NAS, NFS type stuff, forget about it. So ultimately, we were looking at distributed file systems. At the time, the one that really popped out the most was MobileFS, which is a distributed file system. It was developed by Brad Fitzpatrick at LiveJournal, who's now at Google. Same guy who did PUNKCAST, same guy who did a whole bunch of other stuff. It sort of fit everything we wanted. It was cheap because it was open source. It was very scalable. It allowed you to address any hard drive on your network as part of your distributed cluster. The redundancy was built into it. It had sort of a built-in auto-replication scheme. So you could say, any file I put in, have it replicate. I want 3 copies, and it was rack and chassis aware. So it would know, keep this copy here, and this one here. And that way, if you lose, these 2 machines, you've still got a copy on this side. It was relatively easy, but not as easy as some of the other solutions because you didn't get a sort of what you would expect of a file system interface into it. You had to basically interface with it through a web API. And by web API, I mean get and put and delete, actually, I think is implemented as well. So just using the HTTP verbs. Okay, so the general life cycle in this, which is not going to sound too crazy to anyone who's done this stuff, is that somebody says, hey, I went to a meetup, this is cool. I want to upload a picture, whether that's from their iPhone, using the Meetup app, which, by the way, check in if you haven't, or posting through just a web form. That uploads straight to our app servers. We've actually got a dedicated cluster of app servers that, and the only reason we've dedicated that is so that when we do launches, we don't bounce those. For those people who are doing 50 photos at one time, we don't want to kill their uploads. So we actually have 2 boxes that are, I think, just sitting aside and handling uploads. Once it gets into the app, we do the bare minimum of processing on it. So essentially, that's inserting a record into our database, which sort of stores some metadata, puts it into a pending status, and ties it to the member or to the group, depending on kind of what type of photo it is. That app server then immediately turns around and reposts that back to a staging cluster, which is sitting behind that dumb load balancer that I mentioned before. Now here's where it gets a little old school. On the staging servers, we're actually using Lite plus fastCGI to actually accept that post and immediately write it to disk. 0 processing. It's storing some metadata in the actual file name, which I'll be first to admit is super hacky. But so far it works. And that's it. That's essentially the photo at that point is queued into a file system on one of, I think, 4 stagers now, or 2, I don't remember exactly. Some number of stagers. So the queue there is dependent upon the machine. So that does mean that there's a risk of one of the staging nodes dying in this process and losing it, but the actual real turnaround on the scaling process is pretty quick. There's a job that is then sort of a daemon, a Perl, essentially written in Perl as well, that's running as a daemon that's using iNotify, which is a Linux kernel hook that will notify, that you can basically say, watching this directory, notify me anytime somebody uploads a file to it or somebody modifies a file. There's a whole series of sort of events you can monitor on the file. It's all kernel level, and it sends a very sort of simple, like, there's something for you to do. That wakes up anytime there's a new photo in there. It then processes the photo using Perl magic, stores it in MobileFS, and then tells the DB that this photo is no longer in processing mode. So that's the general sort of life cycle of this. Sorry if you can't read this. I did this on Glyphy. I'm not very good at doing diagrams, but that's all basically what I just said. As far as the hardware to do this, so like I said, there's 2 dedicated upload app machines running.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Yeah. So with the DB, right? Go back one more. maybe this is maybe your master has insanely high uptime. Is there a single point of failure there? You cannot write to the DB at that time?
Yes. Although if you can't write to the DB at that time, the entire site isn't working. So it is a single point of failure that takes out everything. So, but yeah, absolutely.
Because higher is the latest.
Yeah, I mean we spend more money on that on those boxes on the master DBs. But yeah, it's and there is some redundancy built into that, but not a lot.
Is the uploading done as its own like upload app, or is it part of the main app? You said you don't bounce those when you go like out the
You mean from the server side or the client side?
The whatever it is that you're actually uploading to, whatever the user uploading to.
It's actually part of our main sort of web code base, but it's running on a dedicated cluster. So the only thing going to that cluster are uploads.
So as long as the upload code hasn't changed in your mind.
Yes. Yeah, and we don't bounce that unless we have to, which is rare. And even then, we've actually built into the client retries on things. So if it does lose it, if it loses it temporarily, it'll pop back up. And we never have the entire cluster completely down. So.
Is there any reason you didn't just use like a messaging system for just basic stuff? Is it just simplicity, or just never came up?
There's no good reason. I think that it was more for simplicity. We were just looking at disks are easy, and writing to them or reading from them is pretty quick and easy. But also, most of them require you to serialize the data in some form. It seems sort of.
I just meant like the.
You mean from the app?
Just each one of the jobs. So like uploads finished, you send a message, then you have a thing that processes that, and then it sends a message to upload to the database. So then if your database was down, or you couldn't read from disk, or any of those points failed, you wouldn't actually lose. Because it sounds like right now, if you went and you were processing a bunch of those Perl things, you just killed that and you lose all that data, and there's no way to get it back, right? Or is it set up in a way where those like
you would not lose it because it is. I mean, it's fairly safe about not deleting anything until it's done. So you can actually shut those down at any point in time and start to back up.
You just have to go reinitialize the iNotify event, or just manually.
Well, actually, it's got. When it starts up, it actually we don't bother with that. It
Okay.
just scans to see what's in the queue at that point.
Okay.
I think actually at this point there's enough sort of steady traffic that the iNotify doesn't buy as much. Because the other thing we'll do is at the end of the processing run is to check to see if there's anything new. So at this point, there's enough sort of frequent that it'll just.
Okay, you're not actually processing the job, and say you're just waiting it up.
Yeah. The job is long run.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Do you ever get groups from DB from the same file twice?
No, because the DB insertion is happening at the time of the user uploads. So all the job is doing is updating a record.
So
Updating a record.
twice if it accidentally processed it twice.
All the update, yeah, it could, but the update is just a status column, so it's saying that this is processed. So if it
Doesn't have to give it like an ID, or it's
already
already got
got the ID. So at that point, it's just saying it's ready to go. So if it tells it it's ready to go a couple times, that's fine. All right. All right, so the hardware stuff I can fly through pretty quick. These are mostly just cheapo commodity boxes. We made a decision a long time ago to be Opteron based. I don't remember why, but that's what we do. Meetup is generally a Java shop. However, the other language that's most used is Python. As to why Perl was done here, I don't know. It just was. I mean, I wrote it, so I don't remember the decisions process with Perl. What's that? Yeah, I mean, a lot of the service, like Mogul is Perl, but
a lot of the
it's all
interface libraries, or the primary ones, are all written originally in Perl.
yeah, we have Java libraries for it as well that we wrote. So I mean, I think the only reason is that at the time I was doing a lot of Perl, so it's just fresh in my head. Yeah. So the upload boxes these are standard app boxes for us. So any of our app servers are actually Java Tomcat with somewhere between quad and 8-core Opterons with around 16 gigs around. The staging boxes, which are a little different, are arguably a little underpowered right now and would benefit from more CPU, but those are quad procs right now with 8 gigs, so they don't need much memory, so it's kind of hard to buy a machine with less than 8 gigs now, I think. So that's what we got. And then the storage nodes for Mogul. So I said that Mogul can address any drive on the network. That said, we still like to buy sort of drive bays for them. So those drive bays are not high in memory or CPU. Again, 4 proc opterons and 8 gigs is about the smallest that we can buy for that sort of configuration. The old ones that we were buying were 8 bays. The new ones are 16 bay. We used to buy 500 gig drives, and now we buy 1 terabyte drives. The current capacity we have now is 86 terabytes. I think we have 72 used. And then Mogul actually stores its metadata in a MySQL cluster. So there is a little bit of, I guess, risk there, but again, not too much. And again, we spent a little bit more money on those boxes to try to make sure that they're a little more stable. We've been running this for years. It's one of the only pieces of infrastructure that I think we've run where we haven't had any problems. Probably just jinxed this now, so. But it's been surprisingly stable. It's easy, and it sort of lives up to everything you sort of hoped it would live up to. So this is a chart of essentially our, not from the beginning, but as far as we've been running cacti charts of our mobile capacity. So you can sort of see the usage, and you can see where we've added drives. So when I say we buy 16 bay boxes, we're not pre-filling them with drives. We'll fill in 4 of them on each of the boxes. But you can see the sort of, as we get near capacity, we throw in a few more hard drives, and you've got a whole bunch more capacity. I have no idea what that big dip there is. Jeremy, do you know? I do know. Yeah, I don't know what it was. Probably a reporting issue. But you can see our current sort of status where we are right now, with about 72 utilized and out of 88 or so, or something. Okay.
What is the actual process of putting a new drive when you take out one of the nodes and the other one keeps serving out of the local cluster?
To add a new drive, we just slide one in and tell Mogul about it. You tell it you basically, I think you're telling it a directory, is that right?
You format it, you map it into a directory, and then Mogul just adds it this capacity, raw capacity.
Yeah.
But it's formatted with whatever file system you want.
Just a regular.
ext3 was fine, or whatever else you want is fine. And then normally there's a command for
Adding
adding.
it out in your software.
As far as the drives,
Yeah.
I don't believe they're not swappable. Generally what happens is we don't mess with these things. If the drive goes down, Mogul will maintain a replication scheme. So right now we have it saying we want 3 copies of every file, which is why we're using so much space with only 500,000 uploads. It takes care of, it's aware of when a device is down versus completely dead. We can mark it completely dead, and at that point it does the same thing that like an HDFS will do, which is say, all right, I've only got 2 copies of this, I need to start replacing what we just lost on that device on other drives that are in the cluster. And it does that automatically for you. So we don't worry too much about swapping. Usually if a disk drives, we just yank it out and put another one in, and it gets a new device name. So I'll show you, as soon as I get back on the network here, I'll show you what that, you can actually see. Well, maybe you can see, I don't know how easy that is to look. Let me pop over again real quick. I'll come back to that. Any other questions on that?
As you're filling your space, you said that you can have copies across different chassis and racks. Are you filling space across chassis and racks?
Yeah, we are.
Okay.
Yeah, usually when we will add capacity, say we fill up a 16-bay machine, we'll usually, since we want 3 copies, we'll usually buy 3 new 16-bay nodes and put 4 drives in them so that we don't end up with like a whole bunch of clustering on one set of machines. But yeah, we keep them across racks, and you basically tell Mogul that this drive is in this host and then this rack. It's smart about it.
Use the NFS for that? For the rack? I know it has the system, but I didn't realize I hadn't seen the rack.
It has rack, yeah. Am I making this up?
Because NFS is not on for rack.
No, I think it does. I'm almost certain it does.
Greg, how do you locate the files in the file system? What's your distribution method? The directory is relatively equally allocated, and then it comes to find photo later.
As far as, you mean, how do we look it up? Well, Mogul keeps a sort of a meta store in MySQL. So you say, give me the host. you actually will query for a file, which is, it's all key value. So you say, give me this, where's the URLs for this file? And it'll actually give you back the three, in our case, the 3 URLs that actually contain it. It also does that in a way that it randomizes them to some degree, so that it's trying to load balance across the cluster. So it's doing a lot of sort of hacky tricks to get around this stuff, but it tends to work well.
Are you monitoring your drives with Smart or something like that?
Yes. I mean, we
Jeremy's
have
one of our system engineers.
yeah, we're using, it's just a bunch of disks, but we do have a disk controller and we're doing SNMP monitoring on it.
And since you're basically writing lots of blocks, are you at all sensitive, or have you all qualified one native file system versus another? For instance, for imaging, using X3 or X4?
We're using X3.
Yeah, but we haven't really messed with it too much since we made the initial decision, to be honest.
Just as an observation, for imaging, canonical file system for doing real imaging of any significant volume, XFS is sort of the way to go. You're going to get better allocation, you're going to get better usage, and you're going to get much greater performance out of the system.
Cool.
There is something, I think mobile actually maintains its own sort of, I'll get back to you on that.
It definitely separates out by directory. It does all the directory stuff. And
Underneath, you have real file systems dependent.
Right.
The entire time we were running mobile, it was behind the caching, right? Never.
Yeah, so I'll jump into that really shortly here, but I want to there's a command you see that's sort of is it mod check? Yeah, there we go. So this is very exciting, but these are essentially all the disks that we have addressable right now. So you can see the ones that are using no capacity are ones that ultimately ended up dying. So those are drives that have completely failed in the history. So we don't replace those, we just leave them in a dead state. But this will show you the rough allocation on any given device. It's not super exciting, I guess, but we're at 82% capacity right now.
Do you have any kind of notification system that tells you, okay, we need to buy more stuff? What was the question? Do you have any kind of automated notification system that tells you to buy more hardware for this?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of like monitoring capacity and usage, yeah. Plus, I mean, we're looking at it fairly regularly and it's a pretty steady trend, so we generally can anticipate it, but yeah, I mean, if you run out of space on any node, it starts to scream for you.
So it's not connected to a purchase system?
Not directly. Indirectly though, yeah.
Yeah, we're again, maybe antiquated, but we're using Big Brother as well. That sort of gives us monitoring on all sorts of stuff here. These are all full. That was not. And
Question.
yeah.
Can you go back to your other graph, your capacity graph for a second?
Sure.
And I guess my question is there some, do you have like a policy on how long you keep photos? Is it indefinite?
Yeah, we never delete.
Forever.
We never delete unless somebody specifically writes into us and asks us to.
So is that going to cause a problem? Your storage capacity requirements will increase, more rapidly as you create groups, or you're going to become, you're going to have seeing that capacity
Yeah. I mean, you can delete out of mobile. It's actually sort of a bit of a pain. So we just assume that it's storage is cheap and these things are actually relatively small on an individual basis. So
it's at least a curve on it.
yeah, no, it's linear. I mean, that's also, as this other chart shows, because photo uploads have been fairly linear for us for a while, so that makes it easy to capacity plan. If it explodes, then we'll have to deal with it.
Yeah. Do you think it will explode with like some product changes?
I don't think there's anything we're working on right now that would cause it to. So probably not. And actually, I think anything we would invest further would probably be more, how do we piggyback off of things like Flickr and let people. I know that this is sort of ripping on my own product, but like when I take pictures at a meetup, I actually would rather upload them to Flickr and not have to upload them to both places. So I suspect we'll probably, photos are not our core competency. We probably won't invest a bunch more in trying to get them to take off, but that said, there's enough people that are using them. There's a little bit of growth in here, and it's fairly consistent. As far as serving goes, so serving on the serving side, as I mentioned, we're using CDN. So the actual serving nodes we have are cheapos, and they're old boxes. Again, everything is Opteron. I think these are dual core boxes with 4 gigs of memory. Serving for us, since we have to go from mobile, means that we have to programmatically get the file when somebody requests it. So again, we're using fast CGI with Lighting. Old school tech, works well. The downside to that is that you don't get the sort of high-speed photo serving or static content serving that you would expect out of Lighting, because we have to go retrieve it from mobile, pull it local, and then send it back out over the wire. So that said, we've been using CDNs for a long time, back starting with Panther Express, so I don't remember what they're called now. Something. Yeah. Anyway, they were cheap, and that was sweet. Then we went to Edgecast. Now we're actually using Akamai, who is, now that we have enough capacity, has come down in pricing for us. However, with some, well, I'll show you this. Akamai, we saw a boost of number of requests in our origin server, and I don't know if that's due to the massive amount of their edge servers.
Your mapping
Put it in a
grab.
hierarchy, otherwise we get small.
Yeah. So we're just about to throw a varnish cache in front of our origin servers, which should offload a good chunk of our work. We do cache photos on our 2 little cheapo image boxes. So when we retrieve from mobile, we'll store them locally. So the next time around, we can get them from the little file system. So it's a nice little sort of quick cache there, but it'd be nice to have a dump cache in front of it. Okay, so this is our Akamai chart as sent to me last night. This is based off of hits per second, which is, I also had overall bandwidth. But you can see the edge hits for this time period were around 2 billion, but the origin hits are actually still about 20% of the whole thing. So that said, everything is still working fine, but I think it could be working much better. And this is a chart from this is a chart of bandwidth hitting our image cluster from the time we switched from Edgecast to Akamai. And you can see pretty clearly where Akamai popped into the equation. So that's pretty awesome.
Why take that for trade?
I think they have a lot more servers than Edgecast, and they have just a lot more edge servers that are out of date all the time at any given time.
It's more like the Akamai for proactively put in the account.
Well, I mean, they do it all through sort of a reverse proxy system. So if they get a request, they don't have it, they come to us and get it, and then cache it. We set long TTLs on all of our stuff, essentially indefinite or mostly indefinite, which we've always done. But I think they just have a lot more edge servers.
It's the mapping, hierarchical mappings. You need to go and talk to them. We had to do it when we switched. It was really a pain. We had to fight them over it.
Yeah.
So you were probably using a Shield server for Panther.
Yeah.
Okay. Shield server was a single box. Akamai had somewhere, once you got them down, you might be able to get to a 10 server, like hierarchy or last mile or whatever they're calling it.
What they call their bidgress.
Yeah, basically. And then you're using none of it. That's why. You're not in the hierarchical at all. You're getting everything from the edges.
All right. Well, there you go.
I say
Do you know if any of those
15 or 18%.
Do you know if any of those CDNs currently maintain like not reverse proxy the push solution? Like basically they store stuff.
Turbo does.
Akamai can.
That's what net storage is for Akamai.
Yeah, net storage is what they do there, but Turbo CDN will also do it.
So you're saying it's more expensive?
Yeah. It's the old school one, reverses one now. You should be getting up to about.
I mean, consider that your content never deletes, right? Never update. You never update stuff either. you will have 0 backup hits, right? It will all be part of the
You get
push
charged
process.
by how much storage is out in Akamai.
No, I understand.
No, so if you keep it out there forever, you're getting charged for it. So you can put it out there forever.
Instead of building your own infrastructure.
No. Do this. It's cheaper.
Yeah, it's cheaper.
I wonder why.
Because they have to distribute it around the world.
Yeah.
And he's only got one copy. Then it's cheap.
But it's their business versus Meetup, right?
This is cheap.
Yeah, although, I mean, like I say, mobile is pretty ridiculously simple to set up. We've written some decent amount of code around it, but you don't have to. It's
You can use Fuse too.
Yeah.
If you want to be lazy.
Yeah, I mean, it's really, you've got to invest a little bit initially in some hardware, but it's just like, once it's there, it just scales ridiculously easy. So,
Going back to like the Lightsy plus CGI configuration, is that your code? Or
yeah, we can look at that. It's very exciting.
I think they have like Nginx modules now too. So if you're lazy, you can just.
my point is that, I mean, module knows all those nodes. They don't change that often, right? So just have a little faster locales. I mean, load file would be faster, right? Considering comparing to everything else. Or is it not worth it? Is it not worth it to do load file and try to go into like system level load instead of application load? How do you mean? Load file is system call.
Send file? Send file.
Send file.
Yes.
One more.
I don't know if we can do that with required with deploying across the web. Hold on one second, I'll load it up real quick. Photos. I think this is it.
Generally, just putting a reverse cache in front of it.
You can go ahead. You can go ahead and use Nginx on even the server side, or LightD on the server side. Meaning, you've got the actual storage node, and that's running like a LightD or something like that, that talks to the actual thing that looks up the actual thing. So it's a two-tier system. You can't use send file off of the outside edge, though.
No,
It won't work. So it doesn't matter. Really, you've got to go from the actual one that's talking to the net to the machine and pull it back and then send it out.
Is there a mechanism where you just serve directly out of local to the web?
You can, but it's not recommended. So the default distribution of mobile uses another Brad Fitzpatrick piece of software called Perlball, which is his own sort of Perl web server-y type thing. We're actually in the process of switching over to using LightD in front of it. That should allow that to happen. I don't know. I mean, theoretically you can at that point, because you're just getting back, you say, where's this file live? It literally gives you back a list of URLs to host machines, so mobile URLs, right? But they're just URLs, so you theoretically could do that. I mean, I think that would mean we would essentially have to sort of make our mobile machines addressable to the public, and that's maybe okay. I mean, we can proxy through that.
And you have to have your Java servers do lookups against mobile through the mobile libraries.
Yeah, but that's relatively easy.
Yeah.
We're doing that as well. So it's, yeah, it could. I wouldn't do it with Perlball. I mean, I don't think it was designed. Well, maybe it was. I don't know. Maybe I would do it.
Whole life journals running it.
If you look at like how they're doing it though, I mean like Rackspace, their cloud files does the exact thing that they're doing. So I mean, I don't think anyone here is going to be at a bigger scale than them. So doesn't need to worry about too much.
Plus, you can't cache that with Flash.
This isn't super exciting here to look at, and actually, I'm not sure you can see it as well with this color scheme. Can we hit the light here?
Yeah, there you go. Your desktop is atrocious.
I know, sorry.
It's just Apple Plus. Apple Plus.
I never actually use better? Maybe bigger.
Perfect.
All right, so a lot of this is just fast CGI boilerplate, but you can essentially see that the Git path call that line I'm on That's actually a request into to get the paths from mobile, and that'll actually give you back a list. So from that point on, we were opening it, and what are we doing here? Reading it and then printing it back out. So nothing super exciting there. I guess we could pass it down here somewhere. See if I can find the actual mobile calls. I think we're using the library though, so it's sort of abstracted away.
Where is this code then? What are we looking at?
This is the fast CGI code for the serving component and lighting. So the whole thing is pretty tiny, but all it does is takes a photo URL, which is almost always got some sort of primary key ID in it. And from that we have and then there's also a type. So it can be a member photo or it can be an event photo. From that we just do a lookup in mobile. Mobile has namespaces as well, so we'll say, all right, for the member photo namespace, give me back the content for this. Give me the URLs for this key, which is just the same key. We use the same key as the record in MySQL, which is just an ID, and then we stream it back. We just request it from those servers, and then immediately turn around and write the content back out. It's not super exciting, I guess.
You said yourself that stuff that is not super exciting for you.
Sure. Yeah.
Apple minus, double shift minus.
All right. So one other thing to look at, just because I think it'd be fun to show off some object-oriented Perl in here. It's probably the only time you'll get to see that. So the general stager code runs, loads. Basically, I'll load that actually. Let me just do that now.
Yeah, you're using that libraries.
All right, so this is the stager code. I'll skip through config reading. It demonizes itself. Spawns it. So we're actually spawning workers per CPU. So it's sort of, Perl doesn't actually have threading, but it's actually faking it's a threading model by a whole series of, what are we using? Yeah, we're using forks actually. So it basically looks as if you're using threads, but it's actually a parent process that's managing a bunch of children. So we run a worker thread or a process, and then we have our parent thread or process, which is monitoring which is in a tight loop waiting for the iNotify hooks. And then we have a series of workers, and we tend to run one per CPU because that tends to balance pretty close to getting us maximum CPU utilization. That makes sense? Yeah. So there's a whole bunch of stuff in here. So here's the general sort of worker thread structure. Looping until you shut it down. It grabs an entry out of, you see down here, you've got a job queue, which is basically just dequeuing out of the iNotify is dropping things into a queue. Oops. We instantiate the stage task stage object thing here, which is an OO Perl, very exciting. You know you can do it. It calls init. Let's see. And basically, right there is the bulk of it, which is process and stage. So that, however you implement that object. So we actually do this for photos, and the other thing we process through this cluster is meetup groups can have files, sort of akin to like I said, Yahoo group. So somebody can upload an Excel spreadsheet of their members' D&D scores or something, I don't know, and we run that through here as well. So this allows us to sort of abstract out the processing and staging process of those. So photos, we want to run through ImageMagick. File uploads, we run through virus scanners, and that's about it.
So for photos, can you go a little deeper into what you do there?
Yeah. So the general object that we're working at, this is an abstract class in Perl, which is really pretty. Defines a handful of methods you need to implement. Process stage, there's an update DB, there's a cleanup, and that's about it. So everything else is managed inside of the actual class. Yeah, we are using mobile in here. The mobile code base. Let's see. I should just look in front of me instead of looking on my shoulder. Yeah, so here's the process method in here.
You wrote this documentation right before Meetup, right?
No, actually, this code hasn't been touched in a long time. So a handful of things we're doing. One, you'll see this line here where we're actually spawning a system process. So I mentioned that ImageMagick segfaults, well, that takes out running Perl processes as well. So we're sort of cheating to see if ImageMagick can identify this file at all. We don't really do much with it, other than if that fails, then we get a failure code back from the shell that we spawn, and we know to bail early at this point. That's one little hack. That still doesn't catch everything. There's some cases where ImageMagick will identify a file and say, yeah, I know what this is, and then you try to run convert on it, and the whole thing still segfaults. So that's always fun. At any rate, here we are grabbing a Perl magic object. We read in the photo. If we're running any sort of auto orientation mode, then we'll try to orient. That can get tricky, just as we found that cameras send sort of all sorts of different orientations in their exit, and sometimes it doesn't work well. We're not normalizing. We do strip exit from, not from, we actually store an original copy and we won't strip it from here. There's anytime where you're seeing sort of self-photo strip like that or self-photo normalize, that's actually a reference to a config file setting that we've got. So most of these are off, so we're not doing anything with that. Quality, just JPEG messing with that. So in this case, we're doing nothing more than saving the file back into sort of new file in case we processed it. And this is still in a temporary sort of working directory. We have yet to put it into mobile.
Do you store the original long term?
Yes. So you can always get to the original, and we don't really mess with it.
Any original is in mobile yet at this point either?
Nothing is in mobile yet at this point.
Do you put it back? Do you store it in the mobile?
We do. Yeah, and you can actually address it through the URL. So. All right, so this we're reading in some configs, and then we just sort of loop over the various sort of dimensions we want to scale to. And let's see what else. We're cloning this somewhere. Oh yeah, right here. So we actually do a clone of the object, the Perl magic object, which is a representation of the photo itself. And not very exciting. So we strip all EXIF and any meta from it. These are on the scaled photos. We don't strip exit against any original. And then we're doing a few different, so we're using resize on JPEG and sample on GIF or PNG. I don't remember why. I think just subjectively it looked better when we were playing with this. And you write it out to the temp file. And that's kind of it, right, for processing. There's not much going on there.
Do you have a mechanism for, like, let's say something comes on, like, oh, we need a new size?
That's the question.
Like every image on the whole site needs to now.
Yeah, that's a pain in the ass.
Yeah.
So we have another Perl script that allows us to basically resize everything. And what it does is retrieve the original from mobile, run a process on it, and then scale it and put it back in. I think the last time we did that, it took us about 2 weeks to go through the entire thing, and that was with a reasonable sort of sleep in between, so we weren't like totally bombarding everything.
We used to have that problem with photo log, but what we did was we actually, the image serving cluster itself, we served it on demand.
Yeah.
In one case, the photo tended to be incremental.
Yeah.
I'd probably do like a 5 or 10 minute, like what I know kind of solves the problem for us.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's.
I made some different decisions, but in a kind of different ways.
Yeah, almost done here, and then we'll jump into it. It's interesting because we've got Etsy here, who I know does a lot of photos, and we've got and Warren works at the photo log, so they do really lots of photos. So I'd love to hear how we were doing on demand. Oh yeah, you guys are doing a lot too. Let's see. What else?
That way.
Let's see. One other thing. All right, so staging is putting it into mobile. So this is the method that ports stored in mobile. Again, not super exciting. We're just using the mobile CPAN module, which allows you to see where we're actually we try to store the file right here on this line. We try 5 times, so if it fails 5 times, we just give up and mark everything as an error. The other thing is we're fairly, with all of this, we're fairly forgiving of errors, so if anything goes wrong, we just flip the status of the database to an error upload and message the user and they can upload again. So it's not maybe the best use case, but like again, our primary goal in life is not to be a photo storage facility, so we're okay with a little bit of error. That's it, kind of.
When does it go actually into?
That was this process up here, this stage process. So. Yeah, it's essentially this one
line.
Yeah, it is this one line right here. Just store file. You tell it what the key is. In this case, it's the ID. You tell it a class, which is sort of the namespace in mobile, and then that third argument is where it lives on your local file system, and then puts it in there.
So that's pretty easy. Is there any sense of like this being atomic? So
if we lose everything,
like 2 of them go in, so the rest do.
We still error on that, so it's atomic as far as like if we get large in the thumbnail in, but we don't get the sort of medium size in, we'll error out.
You say it
didn't work. And again, we lose that space, but after these things are scaled down to thumbnail size or even like sort of what we consider a large size, they're pretty small. Right?
So do you force the quality, JPEG quality?
Yeah, I think we are.
How do you define the optimal or the quality you go with?
I think we force that right now. Where is that? I can't remember what it is. I think we're setting it to, I think we arbitrarily picked 75 for JPEG quality. So, there were a lot of decisions like that that were sort of subjective at the time, like, oh, it's okay.
Yeah, the thing is that we have some vendors that produce photos for us automatically in 100%, in 100 quality, and it's a lot of fun, and we're trying to understand what we want to do with that.
See a picture that Sergey took.
Sorry, was your question just about JPEG quality?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's something I'm still working out. About figuring out the strategies.
Yeah, because for some thumbnails it can be relatively low, depending on what kind of photos you have. For us, it's like thumbnails of the videos that were filmed with security cameras. So that is very different from HD, like a So, and I'm trying to understand what's the best approach. Right now, we're telling the users to kind of process them, but it will not work. I know.
Publisher is like something printed, and your whole goal is just what looks good on the screen, and your ultimate priority is how do I keep my Akamai server costs down.
No, that actually we don't have problems with. I work for a big company that the bill there is so low that I don't know.
I have a little trick for this. What I had a problem with, I was generating a lot of thumbnails. What I had a problem with was images which didn't have that much information, writing, for example, text, things like that, some handwriting that somebody snapped. And a lot of times you're dealing with white or black or basically solid colors. Those things, when you get them out of the thumbnails, they've got to be extremely high quality because they don't. So basically, the simple chop that I did on it was when the inbound image, based upon its size, is pretty small, meaning there's not that much color information inside, then jump it up to higher quality. Whereas it's just a cheap trick, but it kind of works.
No, in our case, it probably doesn't matter because ours are like 99% of thumbnails and videos and photos. But yeah.
So I'm done with what we've done. I'd love to hear from like Warren or Etsy or anybody about how you guys are solving similar problems.
I've got a question about you shelled out for the identify.
Yeah.
Why not just do that for the resize too? is I think that we're looking at graphics magic. We're gonna be moving on to graphics magic in the future, and I believe that you can do cascading. So you take like one original image, and then you say like I want these 5 sizes, and it'll go through the entire process and generate 5
With graphics
images
magic.
at once.
So that's exactly what we did for a while.
Went to graphics magic and shelled
We
out.
went with graphics magic, and we shelled out at PHP.
Yeah.
And we did, I mean, so we did about 800 quotes. So that worked really. We actually, when we finally did that was the best thing that ever.
Cascading or just the single serve? Didn't you say you were doing on-demand serving sizes?
Yeah, that's
No. We had the capacity to do that when we added a new dimension, but in general, we tried to do all the processing at once if we could.
So you use Cascade plus the shells.
Right. I mean, the on-demand was only like when we had these new mini thumbs for the side. So we did all the processing up front. We got however many 3-4 images that we wanted. And graphics magic was. We actually were with Image Magic for a while. We found graphic magic was a lot more stable.
Yeah, I've got a side project and I switched, just haven't done it here.
And you had better quality.
Are you using multiprocessor with graphics magic? Because we did a large batch resizing process, and we found if you optimize with 2 processors for most of these images, it's faster than single.
You know, after it's been a while since I.
Okay.
But I think actually we might not have
Yeah.
might even have done sequential. Like it was one shell script, so it was all opening one thing. But I think we actually ran the command 3 different times for all the processing that we did. We didn't do it like in one command line. But that seemed to work well.
I work for apartment therapy, and I'm not really at the scale you guys are at. But big enough that it's become a problem, and everything we do is very image heavy, and we have a lot of different contexts we want to display images in, and depending on the context, we might need an image in. We may or may not need it at a specific size. We have a wide array, so 5 is like too few, like these guys are doing, and I didn't want to have to preview them all. So we're actually doing everything on demand, and after running some tests, at least at our scale, like processing them with the constraint that nothing ever needed to be larger than 1 megapixel, which is kind of my one of the accepted constraints I gave myself. Generating them on demand is fast enough that it didn't make sense to pre-generate them for me. So I'm just wondering why you made the decision to pre-generate versus not. Because if you're doing video or you're doing audio, the files are big, the processing is more intensive, it takes longer, but for images it's really fast in most cases. So I pre-process on upload to generate a master that's relatively small, and then I generate all the thumbs up the master. And that's been working pretty well for me.
What's your storage backend?
Well, I was planning to use EVS with EC2, but right now I'm actually just on Sliceos VPSs because I didn't have time to get the EC2 infrastructure going. But and we've got enough storage there that it's been fine. I'm also using Mongo to store images, which is
That's interesting. He was mentioning he had read something. I'm curious more about that.
Yeah. Which I chose because it's really fast, and it's really easy to scale out because you can shard and replicate.
Using the file system that's whatever.
Yeah, I'm actually not even using GridFS because of the constraint I chose. Like I couldn't find a test image that would be large. So in Mongo, which is a document-oriented database, if you're not familiar with it, you can store up to 4 megabytes in a single document. And my master images are never larger than 4 megabytes. If I constrain it. So I'm not even using GridFS. I literally just put the master in a document. So I have masters in one document, and then on demand, I just query Mongo to see if I have the generated image that I'm looking for. And if it's not there, I just generate it off the master right out of Mongo. And that's really fast. And then if I need more storage, I can just shard it.
How's it go with replication?
So far so good, although my scale's so small, I'm really just running on one essentially node right now.
Is that the mean? Is it at all?
Not yet, but I've been talking to people who are doing it, and there's a number of people doing Mongo initially, so I'm pretty confident that it'll work. And my tests work fine, so.
There was an article that I heard this morning on somebody doing Mongo for serving up images. And apparently they were doing it in an on the scale. So
Yeah, I've talked to a few people. I was kind of trolling the list. I've talked to a few people who are doing a lot of these small files in Mongo, and so far I haven't heard any horror stories. And I've been really loving it. Like it's really easy to work with and really nice. And I was looking at local, but right now like our team is so small. Like we don't have a system. We don't have the hardware, and it's so it's like if I can't do it in the cloud, I'm not going to bother. But,
Yeah, I mean, if you have no hardware, it's much harder.
Is
that the same app server that does the image processing as everything else? Or do you have like a dedicated?
I have.
serves images?
So from you guys, you're in Java, right? Yeah. So I actually built this after I saw your talk here, and because you talked about using Nginx upload. So I'm using Nginx upload, and I'm using the Nginx upload progress module. I built a little jQuery plugin around that, and I have a Sinatra app that handles uploads using Nginx. And then I have another Sinatra. This is the same Sinatra app, but another set of nodes that just get the generator requests.
So that's not part of like your main.
No, it's totally separate thing. And then all of the like mini apps or core apps that we build that need to know about images. And this is the reason I built it, was we're doing lots of different kinds of content objects and all the different kinds of ideas about how they needed images and when.
Right.
And so rather than trying to like build that all into the application, they just use this jQuery upload thing to get back an ID, and then they store the ID, and then they use the ID to generate a URL for whatever shape the image can be. So if we change the design of the site, we can just change the generating URL based on that ID, and then get
And the URL actually defines.
the URL embeds the width, height, and propping strategy right now. And I have some other ideas on
It sounds really flexible.
yeah, and I stole that idea, the URL idea from Amazon. They do that where you can kind of like take an Amazon image and like tweak the URL and get different results. And so that's basically the strategy.
Interesting to see what kind of latency hits you start to get though when you start having kind of multiple machines and.
Yeah, no, I mean, and like there's definitely some unknowns there in terms of like what happens if all of you decide to go for a new image shape and then all of a sudden you have a flood of requests all asking for the new images to be generated on the fly. But I don't know. So far, I mean, granted, I haven't been totally integrated with all of our stack yet, but
it seems to be. Yeah, as long as it's URL controlled, it doesn't seem to be like it's.
Right.
But you literally just do it inline, like it just waits until it actually finishes.
Yep, and it's fast enough.
Wait, inline is what the page is being built.
So yeah, you can take a request from any image that uses the system, take the URL, and then tweak the URL and get new images, and if they don't exist, they just come out. And then I haven't built it yet, but I have plans to log last requested times, so that I can prune the Mongo working set. So I don't like if something has been requested for a long time, it'll get purged out of Mongo.
Right.
And I'm kicking the actual originals off S3. So if I decide my master images are too small, or we have some problem, we want to reprocess the actual uploaded master, they're stored somewhere cheap and slow.
Is there a security concern with what you do?
That's what I say.
Just like
DOS. Right now, no, and yeah, like that's a concern. But and I have some ideas on how to deal with that. But it's unless it's a problem, I'm not going to worry about it. So
the Mongo part, is that your capture, or is that your storage for originals?
The actual original uploaded file gets kicked to S3. I store a pre-processed master image in Mongo, and then my pre-processed master image is what I cut all of the generated images with.
Okay. So I've done basically the same thing at a smaller scale, and I would agree. Like you're doing the right thing in terms of flexibility because you can change page type.
Right, and we have like
not think too hard about it.
Right.
My recommendation would be store everything in S3 and just put like Greg was saying earlier, put a dumb cache in front of it instead of trying to work out that bit yourself. The cache will take care of figuring out what stuff doesn't need to be in it anymore.
That's a good challenge.
If you get to the point where the generation servers are slowing down, add more cache servers.
Right. I'm not worried about the that'll help there. What I'm just worried about in terms of like actually storing stuff, like I'd like to be able to just like kick out. It's too old and long, so that the size of the cluster
well, you only need the master,
right?
The process master.
You're saying use varnish for the generated.
And then you have to
right, exactly. So what I did was I uploaded an image, crunched it to something reasonable, so that in S3.
Right.
And then every request that would come in would pull the image from S3, do the resize, but the request would be proxied through like Squid or Varnish or something like that. So after your script resizes the image, when it goes back out, cache this as, hold on to this for 3 years.
Right.
Or
Yeah, so
like-
the only reason I'm not using S3 to store things and I'm using Mongo is because the latency between S3 and anything is so high that it would take.
Even on EC2.
Yes, it was like 500 milliseconds plus.
We're serving some S3 through our data center. It's less than 500.
Really, because when I was doing the, maybe I'm wrong about this, but when I was doing tests and doing some research, people were saying you can expect up to 500 milliseconds latency per request out of S3.
There's actually an Nginx module for doing that resizing stuff too. I don't know if you've looked at
Yeah,
that.
I've heard of that too.
I don't know. You probably have to use some C hacking to get everything you want.
Yeah. Anyway,
Circle this side of the room a little bit.
Greg, I was just going to ask if you were redoing this from scratch, like what would you do differently?
Well, I know that our design team would love the flexibility to be able to change things just by changing the URL. In fact, they want. I get nagged on a pretty much daily basis about sort of cropping and I'm like, I'm not going to run it. We're not going to run all these photos back through a cropper. So it's that I think that would be something I would consider. Probably. I actually don't know. I mean, I was going to say I probably wouldn't do it in Perl, but I probably would. It didn't really bother me that much. That's. Is there anyone from Dropio here?
Maybe redo that?
What's that?
Maybe redo.
Maybe. Is there anyone from Dropio here?
It is on camera.
and I will say too, somebody at the last Hack and Tell presented a project that's really similar to what I built. That was using Python, but otherwise it was using Mongo in the back. For a lot of the same decisions it was in.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be curious to see. Dropio, they presented here a few times ago, and this is sort of the world they're trying to commoditize, and it's, I don't know how far they've gotten into it necessarily, but I'd be curious to see what they
We're at a project that's actually an engineer working on a project with them right now.
Oh, yeah?
No processor.
Where they, I mean, Sam has his visions of like marketplaces of storage and processing. Like, where is everything going?
I'll get back to you tomorrow.
They did launch the Backbone or whatever they're calling the product. So it's a real thing now. I don't know how.
Is that the back-end agnostic thing that they're...
Yeah.
Is that an actual hardware thing, or is it a service that they're?
It's a service. Like, so the idea is that it's kind of like an API like version of what Drop.io does. So you can kind of, and
you just put your own storage behind it, or
that's the idea. They want to kind of be a broker to storage and CPUs, so you don't have to. You can kind of pick and choose, or they can pick and choose for you, so you don't have to think about it. You're like, I want to shove an image in and get it out these 5 ways, and then figure it out.
I mean, I would guess that just about any service would end up being. I mean, there's always the do-it-yourself or outsource it to a service, and I would imagine it would be more expensive as a service, but I just got to imagine.
Well, difference in scale versus small startup.
Right.
Didn't you work with like more complex image combinations? Like I'm looking into combining images into like sprites of JPEGs for thumbnail previews, for example. Like not just resizing, but a little bit more than that. Any stories about that?
You can do some pretty complex stuff with graphics magic. I've read through the documentation and don't even quite understand what some of it is, but I know that there are people who are generating sprite files on the fly with it. And if that's what you're getting at.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the use cases, yes.
Okay.
I kind of the same question. I think with image magic, I want to add watermarks. So I think image magic can handle it.
They do. And I mean, Amazon does a lot of image composition stuff where you can kind of say, give me the cover and then give me the 20% off badge and position it like in this size, and you can embed that in the URL. So there's actually a post out there where a guy like plays with it and kind of like draws abstract images using the URL. Which was kind of one of the inspirations I had for kind of using the URL based.
That's really cool.
I mean, Google Chart API, static image API is one of them.
We've done watermarking for internal tools, like when we want to have like a slideshow of like group photos and watermark the group name. And that's done all through I mean, it's just another sort of admin tool that interfaces with mobile and uses, I think we're using ImageMagick for watermark and stuff.
I did editing at Hack NY, they did a thing with summer interns and startups, and one of the guys had done something like this for Aviary, and he could do anything he could do in ImageMagick, and he had face recognition and all kinds of things.
Maybe. We're actually launching a photo editing widget. So if you have like, if you're uploading 500,000 photos and you want to edit your photo on the spot, we're launching in like 3 weeks. So it's basically lives on third-party websites, and you can it's an embeddable widget. So if you want to talk to me,
that'd be really cool.
Yeah, we're lining partners right now. So
cool.
Come talk to me after.
Anyone from Big Things?
Yeah, we're still. Yeah, Big Things territory.
ImageMagick is pretty slow, doesn't it?
Well, I mean, like I said, one of the we wanted to batch this stuff, so obviously for us it was at the time not critical that it be immediate. In practice, it's pretty cool. I mean, in practice for us, like you upload a single photo, it's usually there by the time the page refreshes. It's scaled and in mobile and served out. When you upload 50, you have to reload a few times before you see them, but they come in pretty quick.
From a utilization standpoint, in other words, from a resource perspective, if you have a process like ImageMagick, let's say it 40 times faster, doesn't that make it cheaper for you to operate and your cost of operation drop?
Well, again, we're only doing 500,000 photos a month, so I mean, we're doing this all off 2 boxes that are like less than what, $3,000 a piece, $2,000 a piece. So we're not spending a huge amount of money on this right now, and at this point in time, with our current capacity and our current load, like we're getting a pretty immediate turnaround on these photos without it costing as much. I mean, these machines, I think we bought 3 or 4 years ago, so they've, from an accounting perspective, they've already been written off and they're worthless. So it's
from a latency point of view, latency has an introduced latency because of the fact of the processing, right?
Yeah, it's not much though. I mean,
Especially for real-time stuff, actually.
I mean, for that maybe, but the thing is like we've got people who are uploading 50 photos and they're coming in over a slow, you know, not everybody's on broadband, and like the people, even though you're uploading 50 photos, you're sitting around waiting for a period of time. So the latency is for the user experience, which is the only thing we really care about at that point. It's a tiny fraction of the overall time they're spending on the process, and it's there. Like I said, it's there within like, if they upload 50 photos, it's there within like 5-10 seconds, and that's not the end of the world for us.
I mean, you were talking earlier about, you know, like when you were first evaluating this, there wasn't like, yes, they just launched and like that wasn't even an option for you. Have you looked at pricing and what it would cost to do your infrastructure hosting on S3?
We have. Do you remember, Meryl? To do photo hosting off S3 or the pricing? Do you have estimates? It was expensive. It was more expensive.
We did it. It was a little bit more than we expected, like 110 terabytes. And we were even using like Isilon stuff, which
you were using what?
We were using Isilon for the storage, so it's not even like it was the cheap stuff. It was still, I mean, Isilon's still very cheap.
So you guys are a self-proclaimed Java house. So I'm kind of, did you guys initially start this whole thing off using AWT, or did you try a Java-based solution for?
No. You mean when Meetup started? AWT didn't exist, so we were like we started in 2002, so we're kind of been around for a long time. But so no, we didn't.
But did you say that you were trying it with the J something?
We were using that was the ImageMagick Java library.
Yeah.
So we used that for a while.
Yeah.
But that's just a hook, right?
Yeah, it's just a hook. Yeah. Through J&I that links with the C library from ImageMagick. That was nice in that you had one single code base, but like I said, if it segfaulted, it took out the entire JVM, and that sucks.
Regarding that zip removal, did you compare it to like Smushit.com and like other lossless compressors?
No. I mean, again, Smushit wasn't there then.
Then yes.
Yeah, but we use it now. And from what I can tell from Smushit, they're using a whole slew of different things, but they're also doing a lot of similar stuff that they're stripping off. They're basically doing the same set of things.
Yeah, it's not a huge difference. Like I actually looked up the Yahoo docs, which are what Smush It is basically based on. They're using JPEG-Tran, I think, to strip metadata. That does a little bit more than ImageMagick could do for me. Like I've also tested this on a bunch of some sets, but the
Stone actually has a blog post where he actually lists all of it.
I'm only
For
doing
some reason, they couldn't
JPEG, so
open source it.
pings and GIFs are a different thing, but yeah. JPEG-Tran can do the stripping it, and then I think if you do the progressive loading style, I forget the term for it, style JPEG instead of the more common kind, like it can lead to a smaller file size as well. But you get the 20% by stripping out the EXIF and other crap, and then you get an extra 1%, with everything else. So.
Yeah, I have a ping process right now that generates like, what is it, 1280 by 6000 image, and it takes forever to smush it, so although I hope it's not going to be real time for sure, and often
I mean, I'm going to make a number up, but I would guess that like 99.9% of what's uploaded into us is JPEG at this point. So, although of successful uploads, I mean, we get uploads that are like Word documents, and like I think we've had Half-Life uploaded to us. Like I don't know what people are thinking, but they.
I think the iTunes binary.
It's like what?
They've got an easy share binary upload in the last year. Kodak. Yeah, that's a regular one. Just drag the whole thing and get all your pictures up there.
Do you have anything interesting about like your working set, like old versus new files, or is it pretty typical that all the new files are like 90% of your traffic?
I actually don't have data on that. Yeah, I don't. Interesting to look at. I mean, I suspect that I mean, just based off of our sort of general user activity, people go, the longer they're more like churn is fairly high for us. So I would imagine that the bulk of what you're seeing is actually coming from new content. So. But I don't have data on it.
Somebody mentioned Nginx upload module. What's the advantage there? Like, is it?
Do you want to talk about it, or do you want me to?
I can talk about it. So it's the advantage is that it basically buffers your entire upload. Like so, if you have we have Nginx sitting in front of a Rails app.
Yeah.
Right? So Nginx, and we do huge audio uploads over 1,000 music, and so if somebody's uploading like a 100 meg wave, that's cool. And so they'll upload it, and Nginx takes the whole thing and streams it to disk while it's being uploaded. And only after it finishes that and the connection is closed does it actually take that whole thing and then post it internally to our app. Like only at that point does it start proxying to our app internally, so it doesn't hold up our app, and it also doesn't remove the memory of the actual proxy server.
Okay.
And there's also a nice, I don't use the progress module.
Yeah, they work well together. The progress module just gives you you can set an ID when you start the upload, and then you can query Nginx on the ID. Which is an easy way to do upload progress without having to involve anything fancy. Just use straight up JavaScript.
Are those stable stuff?
It's fine. I mean,
it's great. So since we've been going for a little while, we can keep this conversation going. I'm not going anywhere anytime soon, so feel free to stick around. But if anybody wants to take off, you can. And also, if people want to get up and do a little more face-to-face, that's cool too. Again, don't forget, I need presenters, so come and talk about your company, come and talk about what you're working on, and also, we're hiring, so